those two paths, let's say, there are ways to lose the war, and there are also ways, well, to lose the war, right? Fernando, I mean, basically, because up until now, at least as far as we can see, there isn't a scenario where you can see Trump win. And I'm not referring to the United States, I'm referring specifically to Trump. That's why the title makes it very clear, right? We're not talking about whether the United States, as represented by the Pentagon and as a military force, could lose the war, which, well, if it were a war to begin with, which it isn't, officially it isn't. It's a conflict or special operation, whatever term they use, but let's call it what it is. It's a war. And if Trump decides on a path, he loses the political war, he even loses the economic war. And if he takes the other path, well, he also loses. He loses alliances, and in fact, he's already losing them. So what could happen? Because there are obviously possibilities that Donald Trump's move could work out, but those possibilities are getting narrower and smaller. So let's analyze this while we're live, because this is a live broadcast that I'm doing here right now on the street while I'm waiting for Astrid. So let's chat for a bit with those who want to be here in the live stream. But based on the information we have right now, based on what we talk about and see every day, based on how the war is evolving and on how Donald Trump has been from his first term until now, Donald Trump is facing his biggest dilemma. He has the possibility of going into an election with practically the worst possible scenario, with the lowest ratings in the polls, even lower than Nixon himself. And let's be clear, these polls are published by Fox News itself, which is a media outlet completely biased in favor of Donald Trump. So, well, in the face of that, there's little Donald Trump. That's why today he came out saying that he wasn't thinking about the elections, that he was focused on winning on the uranium issue, right? Well, uranium. Let's see what happens. Let's see what the scenario would be for Donald Trump to win in the long term. I mean, in history, that's what matters to him, to leave a mark in history with his name and to have done something important, something interesting. See, for that to happen, uranium would have to fall into American hands. And for that to happen, according to the experts, who are the ones who know how uranium is organized, they say that the only way for that to happen is basically with the complete elimination of the regime, which both intelligence and the Pentagon itself have said, yes, they've been weakened, but the regime remains intact. Tulsi Gabbard herself, when she was still director of intelligence, used to say there's no other, more than just the regime remaining intact. Some positions had indeed been weakened. And even today, there are significant bombings taking place. And this is where we get to the only way out that Diabol has, so that Donald Trump can take a strange and difficult path to say he won the war. It's the end of a regime. And for the new regime to say, go ahead, you can have it, come pick up the uranium, it's going to take between 6 months to a year to recover it. It's not a box, a chest where you say, look, I'll go get the chest and take out the uranium. It's known that it's not like that, but rather it would be scattered, it would be in the ground, it would be under the destroyed or partially destroyed bunkers. That's where it's believed the reductive material is. So far, the OIA investigations, intelligence assessments from different countries have said there's no way to know how dispersed the uranium is. There's no way. The only thing they believe is that it's more or less in a certain area. And to recover it when a regime is guarding it at all costs is practically impossible. So the only way to win is to win and completely. To win without a doubt, for the Ayatollah's regime to end completely, for there to be a completely new government, something that wasn't even achieved in Venezuela. It wasn't even achieved in Venezuela. It wasn't achieved, obviously, well, in Cuba, because in Cuba nothing has happened at all yet, but in Venezuela, where they removed Maduro, there was no regime change. If it wasn't achieved in Venezuela, why would it be achieved in Iran? Honestly. So that's why the title, well, I insist. That's my position, at least right now with the information I have. There are only two options right now. What are they? Either lose one way or lose another. So let's go. Let's move on to that part. How could Donald Trump lose without losing so much? right? Obviously, in his own words, he's never going to say, I lost, right? That he's not going to say that. But, well, let's just say we know what his narrative is like, right? The point is to go and see the reality. He said it. He said it, and today Marco Rubio reiterated it and insisted on it and repeated it several times, so there should be no doubt. The only way to win is to go after the uranium. If the uranium from now until the time they remain in Iran is not taken away, if the uranium stays in Iran's hands, no matter what they say. No, they just agreed to dilute it eventually. If the uranium isn't controlled by the United States, you can't call it a win. Because, yes, of course, at some point they could say, look, that would be the least terrible loss for Donald Trump. They reach an agreement in which they say, which I don't think will happen, but that they reached an agreement. The sector regime says to let him go his own way, agree with him, but never say when or give a time that will never come. And then they say, hey, look, if we're going to dilute the uranium, we're going to allow specialists in 6 months. Come here, we talk, and in 6 months or 3 or whatever, they come and say it like that. But look, not in this area, because right now we're resurfacing here, right? Or whatever they're going to be doing, better come next month. Let's postpone it a little. Besides, I don't know, I'll go with whatever you want, right? They're going to come up with an excuse. They're really good at that, and they're going to drag it out and drag it out and drag it out. And absolutely nothing is ever going to happen. But in the media narrative, it's going to say, well, look, he managed to get the promise that something will be diluted. That would be losing, right? That we would have to be very clear about. And that would be losing in the worst way, right? Because it would be without the main objective, which is uranium, right? And with the regime still in power, with Hormuz cancelled, closed, or with total control by Iran, right? And what would be the worst way to lose, right? The worst way to lose would be for them to end up completely controlling the Strait of Hormuz, for them to decide who passes and who doesn't, who they charge and how much they charge, which, by the way, is happening. I mean, right now, they're at the point of the worst loss. Now, we're not talking, again, just so we don't create things that aren't true, right? I mean, we're not talking about military power, right? As a military power, who has better planes, better ships? No one is talking about that topic. Well, it's obviously very clear that the United States is a power in that sense. But here we're talking about what is the reality when you're on the ground, when you're facing an enemy, and you see that they have mountains, that they have a strait that can stop you. And that it's not just about force, and that there's the pressure from a country that's right here. We have to talk about the Israel factor, right? That's also an important factor in this issue. Because the Israel factor, which I think is the one moving things right now, is the one that doesn't want this to stay like this, right? The United States, Donald Trump specifically, doesn't want it to stay like this, but he has no other option. Why? Because all the calculations they present to him, because in the end they're intelligence assessments, and not just human intelligence, but even artificial intelligence, which tells them, look, with all the data we have, if we move on to the next phase, we're going to lose so many troops, so many missiles, so much of this and that. And they give him the list and he says, well, no, the risk is too high. We can't keep operating, so negotiate. But take your time, right? Negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. Today it's being observed. They carried out multiple bombings. Since the morning, strange things have been happening. Shots were fired. There was an attack. I think it's an attack, even if it hasn't been confirmed as such. Because, look, the Iranians don't want to show weakness, so they're not going to acknowledge attacks right now. And on the other hand, the intelligence agencies, which I think are the ones doing it, right? Frentilla. They started with a very strong explosion in the oil, chemical, petrochemical area, which is in front of the Qatar and all that area, where Iran's main gas-producing region is located, very close to there. In that area on the coast of the Persian Gulf, there was an explosion there in which multiple members of the Revolutionary Guard died, right? There is talk of dozens of injured and dead, but after that, there were between 4 and 5 different attacks. Explosions, not with planes, just explosions. Yastri told you about that? Please check out the video. It's really interesting. I think we'll need to revisit this topic tonight because there are extensive attacks happening, but not from the United States. At least that's what is believed, because there is no confirmation on this matter. And I don't think there will be. It's believed that it could be Israeli intelligence, right? That's what people think. It could be from some Gulf country, but the truth is they don't have the experience, and I don't think they're going to do it right now. So much so that, well, in the Gulf country, right now they're asking Trump to end the war, for it to be over. And why do I think things are going to stay like this for now, with the information I have? First point, because oil is still at 90-something dollars. It hasn't gone up anymore. So the oil people know something. They must be seeing some information that makes them say, well, look, they're working things out, and the narrative is going to be, I don't know, let's see what they come up with, whether it's about uranium or whatever. Whatever they're going to say will be interesting. But at least we, I think, should be very clear about it. If the uranium stays in the hands of the Ayatollah's regime, then it would be a success for them. It's not a military success since they didn't win anything militarily, right? Yeah. But it would be a strategic success. So what do you prefer? Lose the battle, but gain the strategic advantage, win the war. That's why they say it's preferable for them, obviously. What did they lose? Well, they lost Ali Khamenei. Ali Khamenei. I mean, how much time did he have left anyway? How much do you think he had left? He was already an older person, a sick person, under a lot of pressure, and so on. He was already known to be close to 90, right? Around 80 something. And with illnesses, right? With problems, right? Beyond his age, he already had issues. So sometimes he would just disappear for months, right? People believe he was being cared for, right? So at the last moment, he decides and leaves instructions not to appoint his own son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the supreme leader. He puts that in writing. But despite that, Mojtaba Khamenei becomes the supreme leader, but not because of his father, since his father didn't want that to happen, but he becomes the supreme leader because of the Revolutionary Guard. And they are the ones truly in control right now, because nothing at all is known about Mojtaba. He is probably either unconscious or very badly injured. They say he is conscious. Look, honestly, I would have shown up. I mean, if it were really like that, maybe he'll show up at some point. But for now, at least, I mean, putting controversy and everything aside, he's got everything to lose no matter how you look at it. The only real solution is to go for it. Because look, for example, in the case of Venezuela, it can be measured in a different way. Why? In the end, it wasn't because of Maduro. He removed Maduro. Perfect. He did his calculations and asked, who am I better off with? With someone like Delcy Rodriguez, who will say yes to everything and whom I have perfectly under control, or with someone like Maria Corina, who is going to rely on laws, who's going to rely on rules, or any other person who might come in, whether it's Edmundo Gonzalez or whoever it may be. No, the point is that if it really enters a phase of true democracy, then they will function like a real country, right? With laws, sovereignty, and everything else. At least there will be an attempt, right? But the game won't be the same. So he said, what happens with that issue? It's going to be very turbulent. You won't be able to do business. And what I want is the money, the oil, whatever you want, the gold, etc. He chose to start making deals, buying oil, investing, and told Exxon they could enter without any issues. Every now and then they make some show of force, like taking Saab away, for example. Or the other day when they landed in a really loud way with these impressively large cargo helicopters, they came in and supposedly did an evacuation drill. I don't know what the deal is. Supposedly all with Venezuela's permission. He says it's just a way to remind everyone who's really there, right? You can do whatever you want, as long as you respect my turf, what I'm telling you, right? What I'm asking you for. So obviously it's more convenient for him to have Delcy Rodriguez, Delcy right now. But here on this side, what they wanted to bet on was having Masoud Pezeshkian there. The bet of the United States and Israel was to have a Masoud Pezeshkian, as the president of Iran right now, by the way, to keep him there, but without the Revolutionary Guard to sideline them. What did the Guard do? They read this. They read the strategy and just said, no, no, no. Well, they took the power away from Masoud Pezeshkian. Masoud Pezeshkian, Delcy Rodriguez, nowhere, can't leave the country. For now, he's being protected. And who is protecting him? The Revolutionary Guard revolutionary. So basically, whatever they say, right? They have the power. And Masoud Pezeshkian basically becomes a puppet. Look, so much so that a few days ago, he opened up the internet saying, that's it. We'll open up the internet. 90 days is enough. The internet is back. And he gives the order to open up the internet. The internet stays open for 1 day. People start connecting. And an opposition begins to organize again. And they cut off all the internet again and send an order from the Iranian parliament. And they send an order saying that every rule, everything he said about the internet is invalidated. Basically, they paralyze him. It's basically a coup d'etat. It wasn't talked about as a coup d'etat, but that's how I see it. The coup d'etat happened since the new supreme leader came in, and Masoud Pezeshkian just does whatever they want, period. So yes, they thought of something like a Delcy Rodriguez in Iran, someone who would say, look, let's negotiate. You come in or have a trusted third country come in. It doesn't have to be the United States. It could be a third country not yet involved in the war. For example, the French, who have nuclear experience, active nuclear plants, and nuclear weapons in progress. Well, not in progress. They have nuclear weapons that they built themselves. I mean, it's a country that the United States trusts, or at least somewhat. So, well, the French could be among the possibilities, right? Because there was talk of several countries that could be a third country that the Iranians would agree to, even through the IAEA, where they would be in charge of finding the uranium and diluting it without US troops, but with confidence that it would actually happen. That would be another issue in which the United States or Trump specifically could say he won, that they actually let him put people in there, which could be a possibility. They tell them, you're going to go in, but immediately, not in 10 months. No, immediately. There will already be people operating there starting right now. And you can say whatever you want to your people, to the most radical ones, but I'm going to have people operating there. That could be it. But, well, who really knows? Honestly, right now, there are a lot of theories going around, right? And how have you been? Greetings to the whole community. To everyone here, greetings to Sylvia. Very good. Someone here says, Eliseo, how are you, Eliseo? Greetings. Hello to everyone who's joining. I'm awesome. There are two Eliseos, right? Both Eliseos are here. I was getting confused. I said, did I see right or not? Oh, great. How have you been? A big hello. Elizabeth is here too. She said, Eliseo. I mean, two Eliseos, Elizabeth, right? Well, all the Elis got together, right? Great. Well, that's it. Here, well, look how things are. So it's nice and sunny, 28 degrees. Well, we already went out for a bit to exercise. And now it's time to share a little about what's going on. This time, it was more of a comment, right? I've really been wanting to tell you about this situation for a while. How have you been? Cebolla says, how have you been? Greetings to everyone who is joining. He says, good afternoon, greetings. Well, we're already here, Yesenia. How have you been? Ru, who is it? Ru Vlogs. Let's see over there. How have you been? Ru Vlog. It's because they're not, I don't even know if they're prescription glasses, but I mean, it looks like, I think they're dirty because it looks weird. Great. Well, hope you're all doing well. Have an excellent afternoon. We'll keep talking more later on. And well, Trump also has a characteristic, right? That's something we have to consider. Remember that famous phrase, a barking dog doesn't bite. And Trump barks a lot. A lot. I mean, he talks and talks and talks. The Iranians are a bit like that too, right? They're also a bit like that. They shout a lot. They say a lot. It's not, maybe it impacts some people, right? But it's not, I mean, at that level of power. People know what's going on when someone acts like that. Trump is most active when he's at his lowest, so worry when he's quiet. But if he's talking nonstop now, maybe it's not as concerning. Let's see what happens, right? Thank you so much to John for being here with me and letting me join you wherever you are. We'll be back in a little while. Greetings, good evening, he says. And you're in Spain, right? You're right. You're in Spain. Great. Well, take care. It's really late, isn't it? It's already pretty late. We'll see each other later. We'll keep talking in just a moment. It's almost nighttime here. And that's when we do the longer broadcast, right? So, well, see you in a little while. We'll keep talking. See you later.